Hello and welcome to Robert Calder. Now that's a name you're probably sort of going, Alex, why are you doing this random Admiral? Well, Robert Calder was quite famous in his time and is a good example to bring up about leadership. And also seems appropriate when I'm going to be quickly mentioning this. Now, here's the thing. I see lots of random discussion about mask wearing, and it's now up to everyone to choose whether they put it on themselves and all the various venues they're going into. But those are the stats. I don't wear a mask about me. I'm early to mid 30s, quite healthy male. I didn't get vaccinated because of me. I got vaccinated because healthy male, I should add. And pre to COVID, a lot fitter than I am now. I got vaccinated because my mum and sister are both very, very asthmatic. And I know lots of people who have various diseases and illnesses which make them a lot weaker than me. I wear a face mask because even though I'm vaccinated and I might get, if I did get it, might get it mildly, I could still pass it on to other people. And that's the point. If you notice, if the person who's infected is wearing a face mask, even if the other person isn't, it's a 5% risk. And you might well be infected and have no symptoms at all. I see that go around quite a lot, and I go, that's lovely. But that means you're infecting everyone. If you've got the infection and you've got no symptoms, you're going wandering around, you are infecting people. So, simple terms, and this is very simple, I don't like using this for politics, this is a history journal, but I'm putting this out there because I'm, seeing the debate going on, and I'm hoping this is going to be a popular video and possibly change one or two minds, which could help a lot of people. Wear a mask. You don't have to do it outside. If you're outside, you just stand back from people. Saw a brilliant shirt the other day which said, if you are close enough that I can turn around and punch you, you are standing too close in COVID. And whilst I don't support violence, of course, this channel is about education. I could understand and support the oeuvre behind it. But if you're going inside a store, or if you're going inside shops and you're going inside corridors and those things, wear a mask. If you can. If you can't, if you've got a medical reason you can't wear a mask, that's fine. I worry about you because if you have a medical reason you can't wear a mask, you're probably in the most at-risk group as well. So I would say protect yourself and hope other people are wearing a mask, because if that's the thing, if you medically can't wear a mask, then you better hope other people are wearing a mask and better be reminding other people to. Because if the reason you can't wear a mask is probably going to be to do with your lungs, which means if they're weak. Oh. Anyway, on to Robert Calder, and you'll see why he's an appropriate person to talk about when talking about this and risk to others, because he is the Vice Admiral who decides that rather than hanging around for what turns out to be the Battle of Trafalgar, but might not have been, he would rather go home and fight a battle in a court-martial to defend his honour. And he requests and takes home with him a 98-gun ship of the line, HMS Prince of Wales. You can all imagine what the court of public opinion does to him. It's a perfectly logical set of decisions he makes at that point. You could argue. You could also argue that he doesn't listen to all the people pointing out to him that the court of public opinion really doesn't matter, that the Admiralty has faith in him, that he should stay and disprove public opinion and those chattering classes by fighting the enemy and acquitting himself of honour because another battle's coming. All those things happen. And what's even worse is that it's all not because of a battle lost, but because he wins a battle. And he doesn't feel, well, basically, as we'll be getting into, his reports aren't published in full, and he feels that the public doesn't understand how great a victory he really won, and how glorious a commander he was. Talk about an ego! Honestly. It's sort of... you're praising me, but not praising me well enough, and there are people who don't think I'm absolutely fantastic. Right? Unfortunately for him, his situation gets made even worse because during the time between him going home, Nelson, of course, and him actually facing court-martial, Nelson fights the Battle of Trafalgar. We'll get into all this. But that means that he now looks like he not only didn't engage the enemy properly in the public eye, he ran away with a stonking great big ship of the line from the big battle. Basically, how to really muck yourself up in 3 easy steps by Robert Calder. But let's start off with looking at him. What is he? Is he a bad admiral or a bad person? No, he's a competent sailor. I wouldn't call him a fantastic admiral. I'm not going to go that far by a long stretch of the imagination. He served in the 7 Years' War, the American War of Independence, the French Revolutionary Wars, and Napoleonic Wars. And he's a competent sailor. In fact, he commands 2 of St. Vincent's flagships, both HMS Victory and Ville de Paris. In the nicest way, you're not going to be flag captain for Earl St. Vincent and last for long if you are anything less than a competent sailor. There are some people in this world who do not suffer fools gladly. There are some people who are completely happy to let fools be and just ignore them. And then there is, on the other side of the equation, from that middle point of not suffering fools gladly, there is Earl St. Vincent, who will literally, if you are annoying him and he considers you to be less than effective, will find yourself possibly vaporized, definitely removed from his fleet, possibly vaporized from existence if he can have his way. It's a very Darwinian process being around Earl St. Vincent. There are several people who would say that some of the historians looking back, consider it a beautiful age, a bygone age, a lovely age in the Third Age of Sail. There are certainly meritocracies, and people with ability can rise. But one of the major reasons they find the ability to rise in the Royal Navy, is because people without skill and without capability are being ruthlessly hunted down, taken out by Mother Nature and Earl St. Vincent. And you can pick which one of those does a better job. But honestly, I think whereas some people keep a scorecard with various inventors and all those sort of things on that they're competing with, I think Earl St. Vincent's scorecard was Mother Nature. You got rid of these 2 idiots last week, but I can get rid of a few. I got rid of 3. You see, I am more powerful and better than you, Mother Nature. So, he is a competent officer. And the wars he fought in were not easy, nice affairs. Yes, we can generally say that by the point of the Third Coalition, you're not dealing with the best French Navy that there's ever been at this point. But when he starts out, they're fairly confident. And even in the War of the First Coalition, they're not that bad. Okay, yes, they've lost a lot of senior officers, but they haven't quite gone completely insane yet in terms of killing off officers and experienced officers. And they haven't started wholesale replacing of naval officers with army officers at any point. And all sorts of things are barely okay. Alright? And before anyone comes out and goes, they didn't do that often, all those things. No, they don't. Those are extreme scenarios where you find officers' commissions being transferred between the various services. But it happens. And to be honest, even the French weren't the first to do it. In fact, if you consider that was the traditional way, admirals were usually generals for many centuries. You've got Parliament at time when, we have the Cromwellian dictatorship, regency, whatever you want to call it, interlude. They're using generals at sea and colonels at sea to run their forces. It's not exactly a sensible thing to do if you haven't got the time to train the people properly in how to manage ships. And honestly, the ships have only got more complicated. Anyone who turns around and goes, yes, the sailing ships that are straightforward to sail. Sailing a ship of the line is in nowhere near straightforward or easy. You have got a big, heavy thing which is propelled by Mother Nature if you're lucky and if the wind's working that day. Possibly in somewhere approaching the right direction, but probably not, in which case you're going to be tacking and coordinating as a group, and then you've got the whole thing of working out how your artillery is going to work and calculating to fire between, when the ship's pointing at the right angle, when it's up or down and out again. It's a complicated life. And again, he's done quite well. He is not an incompetent officer. Myself, I think he's a very good captain. And I think he's a solid captain. I'm not sure whether he should have made Admiral, but this is the time, not the time we're talking about where there's a great big discussion about whether or not you make Admiral. And he comes from a fairly good family, which always stands you in good stead normally when rising up. He is the second son to Sir James Calder and Alice Hughes, who was daughter of Admiral Robert Hughes. His father was the third Baronet Calder of Meryton, so has some nobility, is quite senior, has been a gentleman usher of the Privy Chamber to the Queen, appointed there by Lord Bute in 1761. His elder brother becomes a Major General, and he's had an education before he joins. So he's had all the things which will set him out. And honestly, the first thing that makes you realise this is a thoroughly competent officer, but not a stellar officer, is when you get to his ship list. Because those are some of the ships he commanded. Let me get my notes up. And please, apologies, but I'm going to be reading this from my notes. So, he joins the Royal Navy at the age of 13 in December 1758. He manages to do quite well, but not exactly an accelerated promotion. I just open up, and by the way, I'm going to put a link to this page down below. It's Free Decks. Is one of the places I've been using for sources, and it's a wonderful resource for age of sail information. So, he joins Nassau, the 64-gun ship, as a midshipman, and he manages to pass his lieutenant's examination in 1762. So, for roughly 3.5-4 years later, he passes for lieutenant. And he then serves as a lieutenant on various ships, but he gets a lieutenant and commanding officer post on the Magdalene, a 6-gun vessel. So, a tiny little thing. In 1767. And he stays in command of her till 1769. So he gets November 1767. He doesn't get to pass her till August 1769. And in September of 1779, so 10 years later, he gets made commander, and he gets put in charge of the Lightning, an 8-gun ship. And he serves on her till 1780, till August 1780, when he's made a captain. Then he gets the Buffalo, a 30-gun ship, then the Diana, another 32-gun ship, and Talia, a 36-gun ship. Then he jumps up to Barfleur, 98. Then down to Stately at 64. Up to Duke, 98. And Ephesius, 74. Up to Victory, and that's as flag captain. Technically, first captain and commanding officer. And then Ville de Paris, 110 guns. And then in 1798, in August 1798, he's created the first Baron of Southwick. And in February 1799, he's made a Rear Admiral of the Blue. So, he's commanded a few ships. He's fought in a few battles during that time. He's fought in the Battle of Cape St. Vincent in 1797, and he would go on to take part in the Battle of Cape Finisterre. The thing is, we've been talking about various officers at points, and we know in 1758 when he joins, he's 13 years old. So, for him to get to his first proper post-ship command, i.e. as a captain, it's roughly 22 years of naval service. About right. And then it's another 19, it's roughly nearly 19 years, roughly 19 years, let's say, till he gets the Rear Admiral Blue. So he's been in the service 40 years. He's in his early 50s. And here is the point that's made. Even while serving under Admiral Richard Kempenfeld in HMS Diana and as part of the Channel Fleet, a normal station where you take a lot of prizes, he is described, and I found this in many sources, and then there's a version of it actually on Wikipedia as well, which is quite funny, but as having acquitted himself well. But unfortunately, no opportunity to distinguish himself. Which is code for he didn't make any opportunities to distinguish himself. Basically, he only did what he was ordered to do. And he was probably a bit afraid of failure. And the problem that seems to come with him, and I'm going to say this politely, is he doesn't really ever work out how to think strategically. During the Battle of Cape St. Vincent, he was aboard HMS Victory. He was the captain of the fleet to John Jervis. So the battle that makes John Jervis St. Vincent is also the battle of which, really the first big battle that Calder has a chance to earn his stripes. And in this battle, famously, of course, Nelson does what Nelson does best and improvises. And Victory is controlling from the central line, doing her best. But the point is here. Is that that's what you expect Victory to be doing. But St. Vincent has chosen a very good sailor, a good seaman, for his captain. If he'd wanted to, he could have made him a commodore. He could have done all sorts of things if he'd wanted to. If he thought this was a good officer to allow independence. But he doesn't. The other interesting thing about him, and this is one of those things I find interesting anyway, is that Parliament voted toward him an annum of £1,200, i.e., he would get an annual allowance of £1,200, which he declines. Very honourable. Very, very honourable. Are you in the nicest way, take the money when you can. Honour. Are you going to. Honour? Yeah, but it's money coming in. I know you're a naval officer, and I know you've got some prizes behind you, but. And those prizes are things he's actually had arguments with Sir John Duckworth about. The prize court rules in his favour, but it leaves everyone a bit of a bad taste in their mouths that you have to go to court about prizes and who gets what money from what ships. Jervis selects him to carry dispatches announcing the victory back to Britain. And he's knighted as a result. It's often done as a sort of reward for carrying dispatches back by George III. And is created the first Baronet Calder of Southwick as a result as well. After the battle, St. Vincent has to shift from Victory to Ville de Paris because, honestly, Victory needs some fixing. And Calder goes with him. But, okay. This is the point at which he starts to get in trouble. As I said, he's been a perfectly solid captain. If he had been a captain, he probably wouldn't be remembered, but there again, nothing would be held against him because he was a solid captain. Now, the Royal Navy has a way, believe it or not, of getting rid of officers who they don't want to be as captains, or they don't want to be as admirals in service. They get promoted to a yellow admiral. There's red, and there is white, and there is blue. And as you can see, there is a whole seniority of them, of which is senior. Again, Calder makes solid progress, but you wouldn't exactly call it stellar progress through the Admiral ranks. And you have to remember that whilst he does make it to Admiral the Blue and Admiral the Red, Vice Admiral the Red and Admiral the Blue and of the White, none of those services past 1805 are at sea. So, the only really fair comparison to make is his movement up from Rear Admiral to Vice Admiral. And as you can see, he does that in a little over 5 years. Whereas Nelson does it in, well, a little under 4 years, to be honest. And poor old Collingwood, rather the other extreme, and takes roughly 7 years. Now, this means I'm expecting things from Calder. This promotion through Admirals means he's been a steady captain. I'd be expecting this one to be a strategic mastermind, just to be an officer who the Royal Navy's having face with, because he's almost getting promoted to Vice Admiral as fast as Nelson. Now, here is the traditional phraseology. A promotion of admirals takes place in this order. A Rear Admiral of the Blue on promotion becomes a Rear Admiral of the White as his first flag promotion. Once he had reached Rear Admiral of the Red, he would then become a Vice Admiral of the Blue on promotion, and so until he finally becomes an Admiral of the White. It was only in the Red Squadron that the hierarchy was not followed. There was no Admiral of the Red, since this would be deemed as being an overall command of the whole fleet. However, this was the province of Admiral of the Fleet, and until 1862 there could be only one holder of this rank, and it was an appointment held for life. In 1805, after the Battle of Trafalgar, the rank of Admiral of the Red was introduced to reward the most successful admirals, and acted as a compliment to the Navy for the successes it had achieved during the Napoleonic Wars. It became the highest rank that an admiral could attain until 1862, when allowance was made for more than one admiral in the fleet to be appointed. Now, the first point I want to make is you're possibly thinking here, hang on, some of those dates must be wrong you've got up there, Alex, because there are people who are holding multiple Rear Admirals of colour squadrons at the same time. So here's the point. In 1768, this was 37 years before the Battle of Trafalgar, the Royal Navy had an Admiral of the Fleet, Edward Hawke. It had 3 Admirals of the White and 4 Admirals of the Blue, so that's 7 full Admirals. 3 Vice Admirals of the Red, 3 Vice Admirals of the White, and 4 Vice Admirals of the Blue, so 10 Vice Admirals. And 4 Rear Admirals of the Red, 4 Rear Admirals of the White, and 5 Rear Admirals of the Blue, so that's 11 Rear Admirals. Plus, there were 22 Rear Admirals who were Yellow Admirals, i.e., incapacitated or disqualified for active duty by advanced age or various other reasons to get rid of them. So, that's 29 Admirals in total, including Hawke. By 1812, the Royal Navy has an Admiral of the Fleet, His Royal Highness, the Duke of Clarence. You really don't want him going to sea. 61 Admirals, that is 21 Admirals of the Red, 20 Admirals of the White, and 20 Admirals of the Blue. And the reason they've got the Admirals of the Red is because of the Admiral of the Fleet being the Duke of Clarence. Vice Admirals, there are 65 of them. 22 Vice Admirals of the Red, 19 Vice Admirals of the White, 24 Vice Admirals of the Blue. Rear Admirals, 64 of them. 19 Rear Admirals of the Red, 17 Rear Admirals of the White, and 24 Rear Admirals of the Blue, plus 31 superannuated Rear Admirals. Yay. Oh, does my mouse add up there? Yes, it does. Just about. There are a few other Rear Admirals wandering around, which I think makes a different sort of figure. But 22, 19, and 24. 46. That is 65. And that is 20. That is 36. Plus 24. That's 60. So I've got. Let's go 60 Rear Admirals. I think there was 64. I'm trying to remember what the 4 others, what they were. They weren't in the white, red, or blue, but were serving. But I cannot remember for life of me, so we'll go for 60 Admirals. Sorry, Mosquito, you're gone. So, Calder is an Admiral. He starts off as a Rear Admiral of the Blue, and he jumps the whole way through white and red. In contrast, Nelson goes blue, jumps straight to red 2 years later, and is up to Vice Admiral of Blue less than 2 years after that. Collingwood does white, spends a while there, then jumps to blue, red, and then jumps to Vice Admiral blue. Therefore, in October 1805, and this is October 1805, Calder and Collingwood are roughly the same rank. Both are Vice Admirals of the Blue as of April 1804. Calder might try and claim seniority, but I think him and Collingwood would have to work together. But it wouldn't matter, because they would have been with Nelson, who by that point had been a Vice Admiral of the White since 1803 and was completely outranking them. Just to make life complicated, okay? Just to make life complicated. So they're all Vice Admirals, but some Vice Admirals are more than other Vice Admirals. That is the Royal Navy's command system. It is complicated. But it also, in a funny way, works. Because it means that if you're the Admiralty, you've got lots of levers over your Admirals' careers. Deciding, to jump them through white straight to red. Or straight from a white to a blue, the blue rank next above. All these are options you can pursue if you think you have a good officer. If you have a reliable but not brilliant officer, you make them go through every single level, because they are literally filling in spaces where you cannot get those brilliant officers. And this is to an extent Calder. So it comes to the War of the Third Coalition. The Royal Navy, with its beautiful command structure and all sorts of weird things going on, is now facing a scenario where Napoleon is planning on invading Britain. There are points at which he tries for approachment of Britain. There's points where he forms Armée l'Angleterre that eventually forms the basis of La Grande Armée, which I know is supposed to have a little line above the E, but every time I try to put it in with PowerPoint was having none of it. It's also an interesting period because, honestly, the battles which happen are very, very mixed. The land battles go more or less one way, but there are a few which decidedly don't. And the sea battles, well, you have Diamond Rock, which fails in terms of the British perspective because they lose. But to be honest, Diamond Rock was a sort of lovely thing from the British perspective in that they were holding it, but they were holding it with the most minimal forces possible. At one point, the attacking force was held up because they had neglected, and this is Diamond Rock, bring any scaling ladders and could not assault the sheer rock sides. Instead, they have to besiege the British forces in upper level, and it's only on, after a fair number of days, well, 3 days, with the ammunition almost exhausted and water supplies running critically short, that they open negotiations. It's one of those battles. It certainly is. But Diamond Rock, you have Cape Finisterre, Trafalgar, and Cape Port Eagle as part of the Trafalgar campaign. And there are all sorts of campaigns going on. And it's divided in all sorts of areas. And like any of the wars of the coalition and Napoleonic wars, they are far closer to world wars than they are to the traditional wars prior to that. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that this is a time when Britain perceives itself under its greatest threat. On land, Napoleon looks unbeatable. Now, you can say that's because Wellington hasn't come yet. You can say that's because he is still managing to confuse people with his 3 or 4 set tricks of heavy artillery and moving at actual speed. And the fact that he doesn't, involve himself in the courtly intrigues of a battle, but actually it has a battle. All these things could be said to be why Napoleon is winning. But that's the point. Napoleon is winning. There is a huge army on Britain's doorstep, and they are threatening to invade. Every sea battle matters. Even the Battle of Diamond Rock leads to a disturbingly high level of, how do I put this politely? Of paper talk. It's a small little island, which is a great position to watch and blockade the enemy from. And it has a tiny garrison, which is shown by the fact that they have 2 killed, 1 wounded, and 104 captured. That was the entire island's garrison at the time. The French, the Franco-Spanish force to take it was 2 ships of the line, a frigate, a corvette, a schooner, 11 gunboats, and at least 50 killed and wounded, at least 50, possibly as many as 100, and 5 gunboats sunk. The most amazing thing is that they managed to get cannon up on it, frankly. But either way, it's not a massive force which the French and Franco-Spanish have to deploy a large force to deal with. But when they do take it, oh god, they could get out. There's still a fleet out there. They've taken the little island. It's been fortified on the orders of Commodore Samuel Hood. It's a little island. And so every battle starts to have at sea, starts to have a bigger impact and starts to have a strategic impact, because for every admiral, when they're looking at the battles, they're thinking about the French army in Boulogne, the French army which Napoleon could gather to invade England. That's what they're thinking about. They've seen the news, they've seen the thought, they've got the hype going on in their mind. And this affects different animals differently. And that leads us all nicely to the Battle of Cape Finisterre. Now, the Battle of Cape Finisterre is... how do I put this politely? It's a battle which could well have been very, very big. And there is often the point made that Napoleon says that this is the battle which stops his invasion, not Trafalgar. I'm not so sure about that one myself, because I think that's Napoleon trying to put a different spin on Trafalgar. But the point is, The Battle of Cape Finisterre takes place in 1805, July 1805, off Galicia, Spain. And it is fought between 15 ships of the line, 2 frigates, a lugger and a cutter, against 20 ships of the line and 7 frigates. And it's given the same judgment on the joyous thing that is Wikipedia as you get for Jutland. It said, tactically indecisive, strategically a British victory. Well, if that's what you call the British forces managing to, despite being smaller, capturing 2 enemy ships of the line, 1,200 sailors, and killing roughly 3 Franco-Spanish sailors for every one they lost. In fact, possibly 3.5 for every one they lost. Yeah, we'll call that tactically indecisive. Calder was at the time supposed to be blockading the ports of Rochefort and Ferrol. And when he's told that the French fleet of Villeneuve is returning, he is ordered to lift his blockade and to sail for Cape Finisterre to intercept Villeneuve. The fleets managed to sight each other at 1100 hours on the 22nd of July. Action begins, well, it takes till about 15 hours for the British fleet, specifically HMS Hero, under the command of Captain Alan Gardner in the Vanguard, to start to bear down on the Franco-Spanish line. The battle becomes quickly a confused melee. At one point, the commander of Malta, Edward Buller, finds that he's surrounded by 5 Spanish ships. And is worried that he's the aftermost ship of the British line. And at this point, he's worried he's going to be captured, but actually manages to fight his way out. And including, by 8 o'clock that evening, forcing the Spanish 80-gun San Rafael to strike her colours. And then takes possession of the 74-gun Ferme. Calder decides at 8:25 he doesn't want a night action and aims to continue the battle next day. So in failing light and general confusion, he orders a signal to break off the action. Although, actually, ships continue fighting till about 9:30 because some of the British commanders and some of the Spanish commanders frankly decide that it's still light enough, we can hit our targets, let's go for it, we could get some prizes. However, on the 23rd of July, the fleets were about 17 miles apart. That's land miles, not nautical miles. And Calder was unwilling to attack again, a second time against superior odds. After all, he had to protect 2 damaged ships and 2 captured prizes. Both Windsor Castle and Malta were damaged. And he also wanted to felt he needed to consider the possibility, although we're getting into that, the previous blockaded fleets at Rochefort and Ferrol might put to sea and form an effective junction with Villeneuve's combined fleet. So, he declines to attack and heads northeast with his prizes. Villeneuve also claims he was going to attack, but the light breezes that were available meant it took all day to come up to the British, and he decided not to risk combat at night. And in the next day, the 24th of July, the wind put the Franco-Spanish fleet to the windward of the British. Theoretically, the ideal position of attack, but Villeneuve decides to use it to turn away to the south. And so he arrives at Corona on the 1st of August, receives orders from Napoleon to proceed immediately to Brest and Boulogne, but decides that, frankly, he's going to return to Cadiz based on reports of a superior British fleet in the Bay of Biscay. And Calder writes his dispatches to his commander and expects to be receiving great support because he's just won a battle in his mind. Because, as Napoleon puts it, if Admiral Villeneuve, instead of entering Ferrol, had contented himself with rallying at the Spanish squadron and had sailed for Brest to join Admiral Ganfmal, my army would have landed. It would have all been over in England. But because of the battle, he doesn't do this. Basically, for Calder, the trouble is his failure to renew battle on the 23rd and 20th of July. And that is what ends up with him facing a court-martial. But more importantly, he misses out on Trafalgar. And this is his biggest killing for him. Because technically, Nelson comes over after having pursued Villeneuve, and Villeneuve takes command, and he's ordered to send Calder home. But Nelson is Nelson, and Nelson goes, stay. In fact, writes privately, and this comes from quite an interesting source. I should have fought the enemy, and so did my friend Calder. But who can say that he'll be more successful than another? Basically, Nelson says, stay. The enemy are going to be coming out in a few days anyway. Put off going home. Frankly, I will say I can't dispatch your ship. I will say your ship is essential to my force, and you must stay and support me. And we'll have a battle. And then no one will be able to say anything nasty about you, because the big problem for Calder was he hadn't engaged on the 23rd and 24th of July. He hadn't carried on fighting. He'd fought the battle on the 22nd of July, had come away with quite a good win. No ships lost, 2 ships captured. That's not that bad. From a superior enemy force. You know, in earlier times, that would have been an earldom, perhaps even more. But Cornwallis wasn't sharing all his reports, and public opinion was that he hadn't done that well because he'd spent 2 days dallying around the French fleet and hadn't done anything. You can understand the French fleet. They'd grown fat on the joys of Jervis, Hood, Nelson himself, Duncan, all these admirals who decidedly didn't dilly-dally around if they could do it, and they would go straight in. So, Kempenfeld, another one. But Nelson gave him the opportunity. Calder decides to go home. Calder actually leaves in early October. And as we all know, the Battle of Trafalgar takes place on the 21st of October. Calder leaves a couple of weeks, maximum, before the Battle of Trafalgar. And we're left to wonder, what would Nelson have done if he'd had 28 ships at a line instead of 27? More importantly, if he'd had an extra second rate, because, let's be honest, a 98-gun ship is not going to be something anyone's going to be upset about having. Not in that kind of battle. The British had 4 second rates in a battle. They could have had 5. Which, with 3 first rates and 5 second rates, they would have, the Franco-Spanish also only having 4 first rates, no second rates, would have given them a fairly decisive firepower advantage in terms of the heavy ships. They still had an advantage, but let's be honest, that extra ship would have been useful. And it's very quickly worked out by others that would have been useful. So he goes home. Calder goes home. He leaves Nelson and he goes home to do his court-martial. And this is a point at which he gets into real trouble in my mind, because he's gone home, desire to fight a court-martial, desire to have it placed to relieve his honor, to show his true colors. Unfortunately, he's now gets his court-martial on the 23rd of December 1805, which is after Nelson has fought the Battle of Trafalgar and after Nelson has died fighting the Battle of Trafalgar. In which case, the Royal Navy now has 2 heroes. One dead hero, Nelson, and one alive hero, Collingwood. And they have Calder, whose battle, whatever success it was, isn't going to stack up against the Battle of Trafalgar, because, as we all know, there the Royal Navy captures 21 ships of the line. So I captured 2 ships of the line. Yes, Nelson captured 10 times that many. I was outnumbered. Nelson was outnumbered. You had 33 ships, he had 27. One of those ships, he could have had 28, but you came back in it. As you can see, it starts to become very problematic very quickly. And so, whilst he'd done a performance which would have been adequate, it wasn't going to fit the new standard. Calder's defense primarily rests on the consequences of defeat. He's claiming strategic thinking. Basically, he's saying, despite his tactical success on the 22nd of July, still outnumbered, and he had been forced to abandon his blockade, thus French ships from Rochefort and Ferrol could sail out to, find and attack him, and then he would find himself between 2 superior foes. However, the problem is, Calder cannot turn around and say, yes, I used one of my frigates, and he had a couple at Finisterre. He does have a couple of frigates. In fact, good ships. Egyptian and Sirius under Fleming and Prowse. Good officers. Good ships under good officers. He doesn't use them. He doesn't send them to go and ascertain the state of Villeneuve's fleet. And he also knows that the contrary winds that were prevailing at the time would have prevented the force at Ferrol, Rochefort, and Corona from sailing. Now, I suppose the latter wind factor, I have to admit, is he wouldn't have known it at the time, but he would have been aware of it when he's making his defense a bit later. And honestly, the thing is, he is more worried about the ships, and Nelson actually writes something on this to the Second Naval Lord, that he was more worried about the ships which weren't in sight than the ships which were in sight. Nelson even tried to give him some advice on how to fight his defense, but honestly, the best advice he could have followed to redeem himself, and he does later on, he doesn't get completely crucified. And he does eventually get Commander-in-Chief of Plymouth, which we'll talk about in a bit, but he has one option, which would have redeemed everything and made no court-martial necessary. In fact, it would have probably been quickly brushed away if he'd stayed and taken part in Trafalgar. The fact he doesn't stay and doesn't take part in Trafalgar means that he's lost. It's a battle which, if it had been fought in the 1780s, would have been considered a great battle and got him an award. But that's the Navy he's facing. Even prior to Trafalgar, there are standards. If he got 3 or 4 ships captured, and the fact is that both ships had been captured by Malta, which had been surrounded by 5 ships at one point. And so, again, he doesn't get much luster for that because they're basically capturing ships despite you, not because of you. And he takes a 98-gun ship back with him. I'm sorry. It's all very much about his honor, about his status, which you can understand. Everyone has an ego. But if you're an admiral, you're expected to be something slightly more strategic thinking, more thought. And if the fleet is so big, if the fleet is so scary that's in front of you, that you were worried about it, that you didn't risk doing it. There's another thing which actually might have added to his defence. If he had come back in a frigate and left the Prince of Wales behind, he could have said, well, I came back to defend my honour, but knowing the situation as it was, I made the choice and left my ship at the line behind. It doesn't add up. If it's so scary, if it's such a threat, that force, such a threat to Britain, then you would think he'd have left his ship at the line behind. And it comes down to his honour and his status as an admiral and all these things that he makes that decision. But it's the wrong decision from the point of view of his defence. And he never gets a sea command again. The actual trial, the actual decision is that he's acquitted of charges of cowardice and disaffection, but receives a severe reprimand for not having done his utmost to renew the engagement on the 24th of July, and the Royal Navy can find plenty of other admirals to fill that role. In April, in 1810, he gets made Commander-in-Chief Plymouth, and he gets this lovely house, which is Hamoa's house, to stay in. And that's a very nice place. He's seen the sea, Plymouth, from 1810 to 1813, which confirms his admiral rank and allows him some measure of status. But even when he dies, he's not really lamented in the same way as other admirals of the period who fought other battles. A testament is sort of written, appears in the Gloucester Journal after he dies, which is appropriate considering he dies near Bishop's Waltham in Hampshire. In ancient times, the Romans' eagle eye was fixed on conduct, not on victory, and Fabius's shield, its steady lustre poured, missed all the lightning of Marcellus' sword. Unhappy Calder, we like birds of night, and dazzled by all subduing light, though conquest crowned, they temperate valour weighed, Each doubtful point, then wisdom's voice obeyed, and thou, like Fabius, didst prepare the way for great Marcellus and Trafalgar's day. The argument being that his victory at Finisterre lays the groundwork for Trafalgar. And you can see why it does, and you can argue it so much. But you could also argue that the same reasons why the fleet at Trafalgar is able to win when it's outnumbered by 6 ships could possibly have enabled him to win a far bigger victory at Finisterre when he's outnumbered by 5 ships. And you listen to the ships he has in his order of battle. They will appear again in Trafalgar. Hero, Ajax, Triumph, Barfleur, Agamemnon, Windsor Castle, Defiance, Prince of Wales, Repulse, Reasonable, Dragon, Glory, Warrior, Thunderer, Malta, Egyptian, Cirrus, Nile. And then we go down the British fleet, which is there at Trafalgar. And you have Africa, of course. Special video about Africa on this channel. Victory, Temeraire, Neptune, Leviathan, Conqueror, Britannia, Agamemnon, Ajax, Orion, Minotaur, Spachet, Raw Sovereign, Belial, Mars, Tonnant, Bellerophon, Colossus, Achille, Revenge, Polyphemus, Swifter, Dreadnought, Defiance, Thunderer, Defence, Prince. And frigates, Euryalus, Naid, Phoebe, Cirrus, Pickle, and Entrepante. So there you go, there is Cirrus, still sitting there. Make up your own mind about Calder. Now, it's battles after. What have we got coming up after this? We have got Patron Inspired, Old Richard, Churches Initiatives, World War I, Crackpot Schemes or Good Ideas Badly Executed, and 1st of August, 8th of August, Patron Inspired again, Churches Initiatives, World War II, Crackpot Schemes or Good Ideas Badly Executed. And when this is live, the vote should be live for the August choices. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you like. And if you do like, please like. Please consider joining, subscribing to the channel. Join if you want to have some fun emojis to comment in the chat. Or maybe go to Patreon if you wish to support my research. It's all very nice. Thank you. I wouldn't be able to keep up the books and the research if it wasn't for the lovely people on Patreon and the people who join this channel. And thank you to everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed.